This is really fancy. Are we on? Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. If you're speaking tonight, this is a live mic because we are filming. Thanks, Zach. So that all of our colleagues who couldn't be with us today can watch this training later. I am so happy that you're all here. You are the best ones in this church. Give yourselves a pat on the back. Oh. Only exclusive viewers will. Yes. Only those who watch children and youth will see this video, so we're safe. Did everybody get a folder? Awesome. Okay. On the left side of your folder is tonight's agenda, so you can follow along with all the things we'll be learning together. We will wrap up promptly at 9, so don't get nervous at 8:45. We'll respect your bedtime. My bedtime is 9:15, so that's important to me. Let's get started by figuring out who is in the room. Some of us know, almost all of us, but not everyone knows even a few of us. So let's play a little game of stand-up, sit-down. If you're holding food, put it in a safe place where it won't get jostled. And get your body in a comfortable position that's ready to spring forward when I say a statement that applies to you. All right. So, I am a youth leader. All right. Look around. Who are our youth leaders in the room? Fantastic. Thank you. I am a Sunday school teacher. Awesome. We have some crossover. Check out our Sunday school teachers. Thank you. I am an aftercare supervisor. I supervise aftercare. Yay! And this could be you, because Jesse is so fun. He brings new games every Sunday. Thank you, Jesse. I am an assistant teacher or a youth helper. And Dorothy represents 6 other youth who aren't here tonight. Thank you, Dorothy, for being here. And I do lots of things with children, but I don't have an official title, but I love children so much. And I show up for things like Kids Night In and other opportunities to supervise children. Awesome. Thank you, Carrie. And I am a FAMCHI committee member. I'm on the Families, Children's, and Youth Ministry team. Awesome. Thank you, guys. I'm curious how long you all have been part of our community. So stand up if you've been with us for more than 10 years.
So do we go back to the previous time we did this section and then add that to the current time?
Is that in our position or in with the church?
Just as a human,
Oh.
have you been coming to our church for at least 10 years? Awesome. Thank you. Have you been coming to our church for at least 5 years? Awesome, and that's me too. 5 to 10, yep. Have you been coming to our church for 2 to 5? Okay. Awesome. Have you been coming to our church for 1 or less? Oh, two down. All right. Thanks for signing up to be with our youth and children when you were so new. It's so nice to see who's in the room. I appreciate you playing that game with me. So I am Carolyn Ash, and I'm the Families and Children's Program Director. And I'm really, really excited about this training because we've had a safety plan for long before I got here, maybe as long as we've been at church. But I didn't really know what was in it until this fall when Molly said, it's time to take a look at this plan, and we should make sure it's all still really relevant and that it's also really useful and well known by all of the people who are keeping our children and our youth safe. And so Trust and Molly and Kit Dunbar, who will be with us shortly, we went through the plan and we made sure that every single sentence made sense for our church and how we operate now and would be like a really good use of our time to spend on it and to know and to understand and to implement. So we came up with this one, and it says October 2018 because that is when we wrote it. It is on the right side in yellow, and we'll be going through lots of parts of it And I would love for you all to read it when you get home because we won't be able to get through the whole thing tonight. So what tonight is going to look like is Trust is going to share with us the goals of tonight. And then we're going to hear from our business manager, Kit Dunbar, who does all of the background checks when people become youth and children volunteers. And there are a few of you whose background checks might have expired, who she'll be talking to later on to make sure we can get your paperwork up to date. Then Diana and Margaret are going to do an emergency response training, which is so exciting. We're the first leaders in our church who have been emergency response trained, so we're going to really be the leaders in if there is an emergency or a drill in the future months. Then we're going to go through the definitions of abuse and inappropriate behavior, so we're all on the same page about that. That'll be led by Reverend Molly. And then our own policies and prevention strategies. And then finally, some common symptoms of sexual and physical abuse, which Sarah Woods, our resident social worker, one of them, will be leading us on. And that is key because if we see that a child might have been abused, we are mandated reporters. So we need to know what to do in that situation. And then Trust will cover reporting. So what happens in the case of an emergency or some kind of incident, and then I will say good night and thank you for coming. Are there any questions about today's training? All right. Trust.
Hey, y'all. Hi. I'm Trust. I'm the youth director, an emerging leader, pronouns they, them. So we're talking about tonight's goals, and in a typical college student presentation, I might read through all of them for you, and then you'd follow along, and that is boring. So we're not going to do that. What I'm going to ask you all to do is to look on part 2 of your agenda, to look at those 5 goals, read them all, and say whatever's most interesting to you. It'll kind of feel like our prayer moment when we all just kind of shout out. If you talk over somebody, you can both talk at the same time. It's all good. If you repeat somebody, that's okay. If you want to raise your hand, I'll pick you. So yeah, please take a moment to look at these 5 goals and to say anyone that's interesting to you.
Well, of course, I want you all to become fluent and how to be an emergency responder. Because that's why I'm here, and Margaret's here to talk to you about how that might happen.
Great, thank you.
And you have to think about it ahead of time, or you won't be able to respond.
Wonderful.
The last word, confidently, on number 2 jumped out at me because it's so important when we're with children to convey confidence and a sense of security about why and what we do.
Thank you. Just like Katie, if you see any word that comes up that you'd like to note, that'll draw our attention to a certain goal in kind of a new way.
I think explain the process to others because you can't just show. We like to be welcoming and inclusive and stuff, and if someone just shows up out of the blue on the youth group, we're like, well, great, and can't just start hanging out with them.
All right, I think we're digesting. I'm noticing that we're in the post-meal thing, so I am going to read them. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. Thank you all for following along. So 1, become fluent emergency responders and leaders in emergency responses for the congregation and the children and youth. Second one, learn the requirements of the Children and Youth Protection Policy, which is the yellow packet, in order for everyone who works with children and youth to promote and enforce it effectively and confidently. Third, understand what constitutes abuse so we can adequately supervise program activities. Number 4, know the reporting requirements and response plan in the event that a child or youth is harmed or an allegation of abuse is made. And finally, appreciate the rationale behind screening and training so that we can explain the process to others, such as parents and those who are recruiting to be future volunteers with their children and youth. And something kind of off script that I want to share with y'all. And kind of like, why are we doing this? Because like, we're in a room with really awesome people, so like, it can very well seem like we don't need to address abuse because it doesn't seem to happen here. And something really important to realize is that in our context and in this time in our country, in the world, there's a lot of abuse happening, and what we're learning is that very good people can be tempted into harm, and because of that, it's not enough to just be neutral about abuse. When so much is happening, it's not enough for us to not do anything about it and think that that's fine. We have to be proactive in helping people heal and feeling safe here. So that's what we're doing here. All right. Thank you. Kit Dunbar. Yeah. So Kit Dunbar is going to tell us about background checks in just a moment. Many of you are familiar with them, but if there's anything new or just worth refreshing on, that's what Kit will be doing with us.
Thank you. Yes. Thanks for holding out for me. How are we all doing tonight? Happy, full? Yes. Okay, background checks. Part of the program is to keep people more current because basically with a background check we get what has happened in the past, and if something goes in between the time we test you and when you're here working with the kids, they don't tell us. That's not how our background checks work. So we need to retest every 2 years. So we have a wonderful list here of people who are up for retesting. When you are looking, which was part of your handout, at the verbiage, it talks about a consumer reporting agency. And it is kind of a generalization of verbiage. It is not that we are looking at your credit score. We are looking at your criminal history. We are looking at your motor vehicle records. We are looking basically at places you've lived is what the major hit is that we see on these. This is just kind of a template from the place where we get our testing done, which is called Presidium. That's why you see the name at the bottom of the page. Presidium was recommended to us by the UCC National. So it is kind of what they recommend the UCC churches within the States and Canada are using. We ask that you fill it out both sides. It kind of duplicates the information, but that's their form and says that we have your permission to do the check. Because it is part of this Consumer Reporting Act, you can afterwards, when you get a copy of it, request your consumer credit report if you would like one for free, because we did a background check. That is part of the way this whole thing works, even though we don't see a background check, or I mean a credit report on you. We just get the background check. Yes. Should be the last couple pages, starting with disclosure regarding background investigation, not information. People finding it? The last page has like a lot of information about the type of business and contacts. It talks, different states have different regulations, and since Presidium is a national organization, they have information for all the different states listed there. And as I said, after we get these back, we print out and you get a copy, as well as we are now noting in Realm, because we have the kind of backdoor ability to do that, when your background check was. And that way it'll be a little bit easier for us to find you 2 years later to get you rechecked. Any questions? Yes?
Do I have to fill this out?
Good question. I will check for minors. I am not sure, because we have not had a minor fill one out yet. So we'll get back to you.
Who wants to fill this out and give it to you?
Some people already have, and some people are up for testing, let alone new faces who are here who we will need to test. So if you could see me afterwards, there's a whole long list. And so, yes, for a lot of people, yes. For some people, no, because you've been recently completed.
Do we need to get fingerprints again, or?
What?
Do we get fingerprints here? I've been
No, we don't do fingerprinting. Fingerprinting is different,
Okay.
and we do not do fingerprinting. And that was kind of based on the fact that this, the UCC said, use this for your background checks.
Okay.
If you work camp, currently camps do fingerprint for the region.
Does that count then?
Well, it's not a background check for our records, and so we kind of like to have our own. Yes.
Do we need to list 4 references, and if so, what kind of people should we?
That is a different part of your form.
Oh, that's a different.
That is not the wonderful background check. That is part of the application to be a youth volunteer, and someone else is covering that part. Okay, I know there's a lot in that packet that you have, the yellow packet.
Oh, I see.
Do you see kind of?
Want to job application for Connie right now?
Yes, yeah, if you can have 4, that would very much be appreciated. Ideally, folks from different walks of life, like if you could get somebody from work or school and somebody who knows you personally, so you can kind of get a well-rounded picture.
Okay.
And especially if you have someone who has observed you working with children or youth. That would be great.
Other questions? I'm
And,
always.
Also, to note with that, that form is not one that has to be redone every 2 years. That's just for like when you're first starting.
Right, an intake form versus your background check is a totally different thing. So, and I am your business manager of your church, so I'm here 9 to 5, well, actually 8 to 4, Monday through Friday, if you need any other questions answered, or if you need forms, and yes, I'll be glad to help. Thank you all. Thank you for being here.
Diana and Margaret.
I'm so glad all of you could be here tonight. You know, I'm also a Red Cross volunteer, and I do community preparedness, and so this is just another chance. In fact, I was filmed doing a community preparedness presentation a couple, 2 years ago maybe, something like that. Yeah, so if you ever want to see a film of a community preparedness talk, you can get it. At any rate, we want to talk about preparedness for the church. And, you know, emergencies can happen at any time, and generally they happen without warning. So that's why they're an emergency. And the ones that we would like to talk about, and Carolyn, I don't know because you're filming whether you want us to do the field trip or not, but that you suggest we should. Okay, well, we're going to do it in a different order than you had on the list. So yeah, I'd like you to hand that out. It is on the next to the last page of the entire emergency preparedness document, which you can read in case you can't go to sleep at night.
That won't help you sleep at night, by the
She
way.
doesn't think it'll help, but I think, who knows?
Who
At any
knows?
rate, so we are concerned about fire. In the Bay Area, we're concerned about fires, and this can be a structure fire, as we've noticed. Things burn down, even churches.
Even churches.
And earthquakes, which we expect to happen sometime in the near future. And also, Margaret's going to talk a little bit about active shooter issues, but we'll do that last. So, what would you do if you were teaching your Sunday school class in this room and you felt the ground start to shake? What would you do?
Tell all the kids to dive under something that could give some protection and hold on and cover their necks and heads.
That's exactly right. Drop, cover, and hold on. Now, why would you want to hold on to this chair if you were under it?
Because in a really big earthquake, things could move around. quite a
Right.
lot.
The chair could walk off your head, and you want the chair over your head because your head and neck is the most important part of your body. The other thing that you might have to do, whether it was an earthquake or a fire, is evacuate this room. Now, our plan, when you read it, is not to run outside right away. because in the Bay Area, running outside can be a problem. Because if you ever saw films of either Napa earthquake or the Christchurch earthquake or Santa Cruz, all of the facades were on the sidewalk. So if you're on the sidewalk and the facade's on the sidewalk and you're under the facade, not a good thing. So we want to make sure that we stay where we are until we're sure that it's safe to evacuate. Because the sanctuary's had a retrofit, that means that it's going to stand up. That's why we did it. And it's important not to run outside and have an aftershock that puts the rest of the bricks that were or the rest of the side of the UC dorm onto the street on your head. So we want to assess the situation, and the minister in charge is going to assess the situation and let people know what they're supposed to do. Now, we're going on a field trip. We're going to go up to the tower room, which is my personal favorite. And we're going to talk about evacuation routes. Now, if you look at this room, this is a great room for evacuation. You can go out those doors and go immediately out into the street if there's a fire, and go around the building and go over to see the Presbyterians across the street. And that's our plan. We used to say go into the parking lot, but my husband was here for the last fire, and the parking lot was not a good option. It was too close to the fire. So we want to get somewhere else across the street.
And you'll see that in the emergency plan.
Yeah,
That is the place we want everyone to group, is in the Presbyterian Church parking lot, far enough away.
If the fire is coming this way, you can go out that way. You can go out through Loper. You can go out that way. It's really a great room.
Not the parking lot, but the terrace right in front of their church.
Yes,
The terrace.
the terrace in front of
Okay,
the church,
that-
right.
okay.
Yeah, we don't want to go there. We want to go up to their front doors and say, we need help. And they're going to say, come in, just like they did last time, right? So
So you've actually practiced that drill. That's really good of you guys
Yeah.
to run that a couple
Yeah.
times. That's good.
Yeah, that's where my husband went when he was in the church office when the fire happened.
Wow.
Anyway, so we're going to go upstairs, because some of you probably have never been to the tower room. Does everybody know where the tower room is? Yeah. Okay, well, let's go upstairs and see what our options if we have a fire up there. Looking for your exits is probably the way you came in. But the problem is, I'm one of these people who can always think of the worst case. And the worst case would be a fire in the Hall of Reverence, which would mean that you would not be able to go down the stairs because of the smoke. So instead of going down the stairs because of the smoke, you can go out this way. No, oops, I did the right thing. And as Bruce says, it opens like butter.
Butter.
Here is an option for you to go down the ladder and go across the cloister into nothing. It used to be that we would evacuate into the North Room, but the North Room, of course, is not there anymore. However, we expect the fire services to show up in a reasonable amount of time, and hopefully, by that time, we will be able to get down in this place.
There's no way down from that.
There's a ladder in a box.
There's a ladder. Oh, okay, Emma says there's. Is it over on the other side?
No, it's just
Is this right here? Oh, there's a fire ladder in that box with the red cover. What you do is you hook it on the bolster and you climb down. Okay. And this is a new addition?
It's also accessible from the balcony of the sanctuary. Through
Yeah.
that door, the next door that's past.
Yeah.
It's that way.
That way.
From the balcony. So you
Okay.
walk down to the
Oh,
front
right,
edge of the
you go out
balcony
that
and you hang a
window.
left, and there's
Yeah.
a door there that leads out to that.
But the better way out of the balcony, if you can get down the first set of stairs, there is, as Emma pointed out to me, a nice door that says exit that goes down into the parking lot.
Yeah, the lower
And we
front
will
right.
look at that on our way out this way. Because if you're sitting in the balcony, that's definitely. But as you can see, it's easy to open, it's ready to go. And so I want people who may have meetings up here, if you're in the meeting, I want you to point this exit out to them. you do see that there is a sign that says tower room evacuation. If the fire alarm goes off, you check to see if there's smoke. If there's no smoke, you go down the stairs. If there's smoke, you go out the window. This is a really good example of how they did plan to have 2 exits in this room. You know, this was a planned thing. So I want you to think about wherever you are, as the Berkeley rep says to us, look for 2 exits. If you're on the airplane, look for 2 exits. You don't know which way it might be easiest to go. And this means at church or anyplace else. Okay, shall we go down to the sanctuary and talk about our next topic? Or Margaret will talk about our next topic.
We're going to see the other
Yeah, shall we-
from here, though, right?
Yeah, when we walk down to the balcony, I want you to look across.
Flight attendant.
Carol Mayer,
Yes, please.
hand gesturing. Go this way.
But look,
That's the exit. That's what you want to do. And it's a creepy little, creepy little stairway.
is what takes you out to where the ladder leads from the tower room.
So this doesn't go downstairs, it goes
That
to
goes
the
to that
ladder.
open. Yeah, it goes
Okay.
to the same place as the tower
That
room
goes-
window goes.
Why don't we scoot
What's
in
that?
here so
What's
that
that
everyone
to the
can
right?
come down and hear you say the same thing again?
That is the equivalent of this.
Oh.
So down in the front
We can
right
actually go across
is the stairwell.
We can go
Yeah, let's
across
go
the balcony, and I'll show you the exit, and I'll go
But once you
downstairs on the
go
other
in,
side.
the door closes behind you and you're stuck and you gotta go to the parking lot.
Oh, it's
True
not.
story.
It's not an up. It's just a down.
Only down.
You pick the easiest space to evacuate from.
And I have to tell you, I was not aware of this exit until I am
Yeah, be sure we sit on either side of the sign.
Don't go through this door.
Because it does lock behind you,
Yeah.
we just don't, basically. But you should open it, because it's a creepy stairwell that you
It's a
kind of go,
creepy stairwell, but
ooh, this could
honestly-
like haunt your dreams and, but it goes
It's a
right to the
perfectly
parking lot.
good stairwell.
Yeah.
And it's concrete, and it's inside, so you won't be subject to smoke. This is a really good stairwell.
Now, is that retrofitted since it's centerboards?
It's part of the sanctuary.
It's part of the sanctuary, so probably, see, we put the flying buttresses on the outside, and
Yeah.
that's what's holding up all of this wall, is those flying buttresses.
Okay.
So they look like they're part of the church, but they're an add-on. That and all, I don't know if when you were on the roof, you saw all the stuff on the cloister, all the different brackets on the cloister. That's keeping the cloister up. So we're in pretty good shape in here for earthquakes, and we've got lots of exits for fire from the sanctuary.
Right.
And that's something that you have to realize. People tend to want to go out the way they came in. Don't even think about it. Just look around for where you can get out the fastest and go that way.
I think there's things you want to, as much as you can know in advance, you want to know, right? So you want to know, one of the free takeaways from this evening, if you see a glowing exit sign in California, that's a uniform building code regulation saying that gets you outside. So if you're in a cinema, you're in a theater, you're in a school, and you want to get out in a hurry, that sign means you can go. You have to be a little bit careful. There's places that lock their stairwells for security reasons, but almost always they'll get you out. You might not always be able to get back in, but frankly, once you're out, you can worry about other things, including getting back in later, right? So the thing you always want to have in mind is, I need to get out, where are those signs, right? And I think maybe we could stop down in the sanctuary for a second too, because I want to talk a little bit about what happens when you go out different doors, because there's elevation grades here that you want to be aware of, especially if you're trying to help somebody who's got a mobility challenge. What you won't know until an event happens with no warning, because we mentioned the definition of an emergency, is which door works. So it might be that retrofitting is a great idea, but it's only retrofitted to something, right? At a certain point, that may or may not be, or that might be one bolt short, or, so you look. Don't decide, I'm using that door, that's my door, if I've got kids here, that's my door, because it might be that door. Right? It might make all the difference. So the part you have to decide at that moment is which door do you want now, right? So that's unfortunately something we can't predict for you or tell you in advance. So
But as long as you know where all the doors are
Right.
and what they look like, you may make a better choice. And that's the thing
Absolutely.
about looking around whenever you enter a building, because you may make a better choice because you understand. The other thing that happens sometimes in a fire or an emergency is that there's windows that could be broken and people could get out.
Absolutely.
You know, there was a thing that we were taught about 41 people died in the doorway because people didn't go out the doorway. They stopped at a doorway. Everybody tried to go out that door even though there were 2 other exits and the whole front wall was windows and they could have broken them out at any time and gotten out. So be aware of your options. That's all we're saying.
So let's just stop in the sanctuary for a moment on the way down and talk a little bit about that. Is that this thing inside? A big green exit sign that said you can go this way, you'll get out. And here we are, not out, right? What those mean is they'll lead you to a path. Something just went. They'll lead you to a path that will get you out, right? So if you get to the next layer and you're still looking for the door, look for the next green sign. And yeah, it's
Although if the electricity goes out, the green won't be there.
true, right?
There's supposed to be battery backups.
They are, yeah. And actually, if the power goes out, in that case, the lights, those flashlights should come on as it senses that the lights or the power's out. I should say, I'm a city planner that works with building staff, so my knowledge of building code is because I got to do some management of that. But that's why. If you've got questions about that kitchen remodel, I'm the wrong girl. But that kind of stuff is, and California is really good. I'm not a native, I'm a transplant, and I'll tell you that they are just about as worried about all of this as we are. I mean, I really appreciate the codes get smarter every time we have an emergency. They go every 2 years. Every city in California has to go up a code cycle. So. So yeah, so the power went out, everybody said, where'd the signs go? And the next year, the code cycle, as things get installed, they don't retrofit all of that. Well, let's put it on a generator and add some lights, thank you, right? Okay, just really quickly on both earthquake and fire. And so the first comment is, notice all your doors. And we've probably ruined you. You probably now will, whenever you go in somewhere, notice the doors. And you're welcome. The next thing is the fire or earthquake aspect of it, and maybe even a little bit of the active shooter conversation. If you're not mobility challenged, you may not have noticed there's a huge difference of that side exit and these sides exits. My mom was mobility challenged, so I noticed in her behalf, even though that's not an issue right now, that's a flight of steps out to a blacktop lot, right? That, if this is not available, then we're all going that way, right? We're gonna have to help each other. If it's at all available and the person is mobility challenged, they have to go that way. It's going to, otherwise that's gonna hurt. That's gonna leave a mark, to quote my brother, basically. So you just wanna be keenly aware, and if you're leading kids or you got, that's an easier exit. That doesn't have a staircase. A nervous kid coming down the stairs is gonna go better that way if you have the choice. So again, you have a decision point that you have to make, and you have to make your best call, and then you have to be okay with the call you made because you made it. You have to make a decision. You can't wonder. You don't have a lot of time in any of these scenarios to reason it. My wife's a researcher, and she would like to make a matrix, and she'd like to have boxes with, you don't have that kind of time. So you make decisions, and then you're okay. That's what you did. That's good. Go. But that's going to be an easier route. It's going over to the evacuation meeting place, and it's just topographically friendly compared to that side. So that's the thing I wanted to point out about the sanctuary. Okay, let's go talk about the last and scariest, or did you have anything?
No, I think the last one's scariest.
Want to go inside?
I have a question.
We're back there.
Oh, back there.
I have a question.
Yes.
If we're during a church service and there's an earthquake, where do we duck?
Under the pew.
Under the pew?
Are they friendly to duck under them?
Yeah.
Well, they're the best place to go. Now, if you can't get under the pew, you can go next to the pew, in between the crawl space. You can put a hymnal over your head if you can't get down there. The whole thing is or the Bible, because you're trying to protect your head and your neck, because those are the two things that are going to get swacked first if stuff falls off the ceiling. Now fortunately, we're in good space because we did retrofit this and stuff should not probably fall off the ceiling, but I still will be at least next to the pew, so if something big falls down, it'll go across the pews and I'll be okay. I'd rather be under the pew, but I don't know if I'll fit very well or be able to get up afterwards. So, you know, I have to think about things as well. But drop, cover, and hold on. In any situation, the best place for you to be is underneath something so that stuff falling off the ceiling will not hit you in the head. And we have lovely pictures of people in wheelchairs with books over their head, because if something falls from the ceiling onto their head, it'll hit the book first and it won't smash their head necessarily.
So I have a question. I'm wondering if there is anything on our website that would inform the rest of the congregation about just some brief notes about you know, emergency response that you would want to take into consideration.
We're going to have a drill.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I ask is because as you see the news, many times when there's emergencies, there's more people that are injured or killed during the panic.
Yep.
And if
Well,
we don't think about it ahead of time, and
We're
we
not
all
going to
should.
panic, we're going to practice. Because
Well, we are, but
We
the
are,
congregation
yeah.
is, that'd be good.
that's what
too.
I mean. The congregation's going to practice too.
May 19th
Because practice
at
is
the end of
empowerment.
worship. Yes.
Yeah, preparedness, yeah.
But, you know, that people say, I don't want to talk about this stuff. This is too scary.
Yeah.
Well, what's scary to me is not being ready when I know stuff's going to happen. You know, and my house burned down in the Oakland fire, and so I feel like I need to be prepared for lots of things. And that's it makes you changes your mindset, and you feel better if you're prepared.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question. What do we do about the babies in the nursery?
Well, Loper has got exits that are good. If you don't have enough people, I bet you there'll be people show up. And also the kids that are in the pillar room, if they go out through Loper, they can help you. And that is something that the teachers in the pillar room should probably think about if they can go out through Loper, because then they could help you guys.
Would that be the same thing for a fire too?
Yeah. Probably, Loper's probably in the best situation for a lot of things because you have two good ways out. One is out the front door, and the other is out, so you're clearly over on the other side of the church. So if it depends on where the fire is, you may be able to evacuate out the front door across the street, but you may need to go out the other way. And you know, when you go, sit down and look around and think what you're going to do.
And that's a great thing since many of us will be there on Sunday mornings when the kids are in, babies are in Loper. If there's an emergency, swing by, right? Because there's going to be more babies than people that can grab them. So I think that's a great thing just to bring up right now because this is the crew that will be in the building doing something with kids. So that's in your mind. Where's the green signs, if they're on or not, and where are the babies? That's a great, great point.
Yeah, thank you, Dorothy. I think it might be good to just talk about your here. So
Want to do it here? Yeah.
Muscle memory.
Okay, so the thing, nobody likes this topic. I think of the 3 topics, we picked this one last because people tend not to be able to hear very well afterwards. I guess we'll go on in and talk about it. Again, I am not a certified expert in this. I've had some training, and that's what I'm reaching through to talk to you about it today. It's really unfortunate this is a conversation we have to have as a spiritual organization, but you don't have to go too far back in the news to know why. So, just like earthquakes have stop, drop, roll, fire. Active shooter is run, hide, fight. And we'll talk about those a bit. If you happen to notice somebody here, you know, in an evening meeting, Sunday morning, one of those events where we're gathering, who has some sort of weapon, has something, a knife, any weapon, anything that could be perceived as a weapon, alert the pastor right off the bat. Just find, you know, the ushers also have a training level. They're knowledgeable in this, but I really think getting to Reverend Molly or whoever's in charge that morning or that evening is the person to start with. If they're just acting odd, then talk to talk to the Reverend and see what her guidance is, right? If someone's actually taking out a weapon and starting to use it, again, this is one of those things where you can't have a plan except for like those 3 basic things. If you can get away, and you have a phone, especially if you have a phone, get out of the building, because someone has to call police. Someone has to call 911. You have to, so that if you see it, run outside. If running outside will make you the first victim, hide. Go, like all these great nooks and crannies of our building, hide away and try to call 911, especially if you can't get to Molly, right? If it's, there's a decision point of, do you yell, that person's got a weapon or not? Has a lot to do with whether, unfortunately the statistics are once someone starts shooting, they shoot a lot. So the church has a better chance of surviving if you survive and make a phone call. That's the decision point that we're balancing. If you're like, oh, I'm not gonna clear this space in time, I don't think I can run, which is a really honest answer. I can't seem to move. Feel free to yell, that person's got a gun. That person's got a gun. And then try to hide. If someone's in this room and we're all sitting like this, there's nowhere you're gonna hide, right? You might duck under the pews. You can give it a shot. I would absolutely I would try that if you could. The third thing they tell you to do, if you can't get away and you can't hide from this person, is you have another decision to make. You can either drop to the floor, and that's a very valid choice, or you can run right at them. And that's a decision you won't know what you're going to do until that moment arises, and hopefully we'll never have to find out what we need to do.
And the other thing you can
The
do.
hymns could be useful again.
Yes.
Right,
The other
so-
thing you can do is throw things.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So and it's just probably a good
Hymnals.
reason why we're here.
The hymns could be useful too.
That might
Really
throw someone
loudly.
off balance.
Right, you can throw the hymns. This isn't a Bible again. You can throw you can throw any book you have.
Throw the Bible.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You can throw.
Handbags.
Yeah, you've got purses, you've got book bags, you've got backpacks, you've got
Water bottles.
water bottles. There's chairs out there. If they happen to see the person doing something and you're out there, hitting someone with a chair will really surprise them, right? That's, but so the valid, if you can't do the first 2 and you're on the 3rd, you really have a fair choice to drop to the ground and not move. And if that's not gonna work for you, you can go right at them, because that's not what any active shooter expects someone to do. So if you can knock that weapon away, that's pretty impressive. It's a really hard conversation, but so you have a couple decision points. Again, get out and call 911 if you can. If you can't run, just run. If you can't run, hide. If you can't hide, lay down or fight. The second part of this is the shooter is shooting. It's mayhem. It's really terrible. And then the police department runs in. They don't know who the bad guy is.
Yeah.
It's like the hardest thing I think everything about this is hard, but one of the next hardest things about this to talk about is stay down. Stay down. Until they say, we have the person, it's okay to move, don't move. Because you don't know who's running in. And you probably won't have a good view. And you won't know who those feet running around are. Okay? So if you're down, stay down.
So from the point of view of the Sunday school classes, if you hear something going on here and you're not comfortable about it, you don't necessarily want to stick your head out and look, you want to lock down.
Yes.
And we need to make sure that we can lock down all the rooms, which we haven't had a chance to really go through. But we want to be able to lock down Durant, we want to be able to lock down Loper, we want to be able to lock down the pillar room, we want to be able to lock down the tower room.
Diana, why are we not just taking the children out of the building?
Because we don't know where the shooters are. or where they're going. Somebody asked the guy that taught us in Berkeley, how far should you run? And he said, El Cerrito would be good. Because you don't know if there's 10 shooters or 1 shooter. If you could get the kids out and you could take them away, that would be great. But if you can lock them down and keep them locked down so the guy can't get in to get you, it's probably better to stay where you are and hide and lock it down.
And maybe pile some stuff in front of the door. if it
Yeah,
opens.
well, we can fix these doors so that they can be locked from the inside or the outside.
Okay.
Because my high school has done that, because the doors open out, but there's ways to fix them so that you can lock them from the inside. And it's, I agree that it'd be nice to be able to evacuate, but you don't know what the situation is. And so we can actually probably get a Berkeley policeman in here if we want to talk about what he would recommend or she would recommend.
Yeah.
But because I've just been to a couple active shooter classes, and it's not a pretty.
We could probably get our second graders to teach us about
Well,
it.
that's the thing, is the kids to do this in school now, right? So there's a training, and the idea is that's if you are in a classroom and you don't know how many there are or what's going on, or you hear shooting, right? Hide. Is the second step really is your step, unless you feel that's no longer a viable idea. Right. Get the doors shut, get the doors locked, get stuff on the door, and get really quiet.
And get away from the window. These doors, the bad part is there's glass in all the doors.
So maybe we want to decorate those.
But anyway, it's just something, we don't want to burden you with this, but it's something that is unlikely to happen. It's just like a fire in the Hall of Entrance is unlikely to happen. An earthquake is likely to happen. Likely to happen.
Yep.
But we have to think through these things so when the time comes, we're able to respond. Because what happens with people a lot of times is they just freeze in place.
Right.
Freezing in place is not a good choice. But if you've thought through this and you've practiced it, then you're going to do something. It's just like CPR. If somebody falls down in front of you, people worry that they might break somebody's ribs. The person's dead. They will stay dead if you do nothing, and might be viable when the EMTs come if you do something. So think about it that way. Think about that doing something, that you've thought through ahead of time is what you want to have happen in an emergency.
Yeah.
And that's our story for tonight, right?
Yeah, sorry to be
And if there's any questions, we're kind of over our time, I think. So.
Now let's go talk about child abuse.
Another story.
Hey everybody, welcome back. So as our leader said earlier, part of what we're here to do tonight is to learn what child abuse is, to review that and to recognize the signs of it so that we can keep our children safe, so that we can recognize when maybe they're not safe in other settings and know when to report it to me or Kit Novotny, who are mandated reporters. And who are the other mandated reporters in our church, Carolyn? Do we know? It's primarily me and Kit Novotny.
For another role, I happen to be a mandated reporter.
Trust is a mandated reporter. First of all, let's find our working definition of child abuse. It's on page 2 at the top. If you want to turn to page 2 of the Children and Youth Protection Policy. Who wants to read it in a nice loud voice?
Child abuse is the inappropriate and harmful verbal, physical, emotional, or sexual behavior toward a minor. Child abuse includes any action that endangers or harms a minor's normal development and well-being. It also includes neglect or the failure to provide for the minor's physical and emotional needs. Child abuse is sexual abuse when it involves minors in sexual activity.
Thanks, Rebecca. So now if you'll turn to page 4, we can start to make this a little more specific. Wait, yes. Is that what I'm doing next, Carolyn? Sorry. Yeah. can we read out loud those bullets at the top of the page? And let's read one at a time. Read one, and then let's just see if we can come up with some real life examples, either from our experience here or in other settings, or from things we've read in the news, or from our imaginations. So, who wants to read the first one?
Take a moment to just
Yes. Yeah. I meant to have us do a couple deep breaths after the active shooter earthquake fire training, before the child abuse training. So, one deep breath. Well, as Diane and Margaret said, we're practicing so we don't panic. We're putting this wisdom into our bodies. Okay, who wants to read the first bullet for us?
Any direct observations or evidence of sexual activity in the presence of or in association with a minor.
I want to make that a real life situation.
You notice a cigarette burn outside kids' arm.
So this is sexual activity in particular. Yep, I should have said that. Well, this particular one is.
Say one that I know that happened. A 19-year-old boy started getting sexually involved with his girlfriend, who was 17.
And you directly observed that? You directly observed it?
Well, I did not directly observe it, but other people did.
Okay, so
So
someone did.
if you were in a situation at an after church gathering where you saw a young person over the age of 18 provocatively speaking to somebody under the age of 18, maybe not an overt sexual act, but kind of like leaning into them and, hey, that's a pretty dress, that kind of thing, and you observe that incident occurring.
Right. And this list doesn't actually, this list covers things that are really over the line, but there are a lot of things that approach the line and can really do harm to a young person's spirit. I work at camp. I worked at church camp for 1 million years, and we get a lot of training in how to hug a young person. Carolyn, would you demonstrate with me? You don't do, with Carolyn, another adult, I might first ask permission. Can I give you a long heart hug, Carolyn?
Yeah.
And she'll give me her consent, and I would do a long, that 6-second oxytocin hug. If Carolyn were, a 14-year-old girl, I might say, can I give you a hug, Carolyn? Yes. I'd watch for some nonverbal cues, and then I would give her a side hug. I'm staying away from her private parts. I'm really respecting her body and her space. Carolyn might be a 7-year-old girl. You can leave. You don't have to demonstrate this part. Who has been sexually abused at home and is demonstrating sexualized behavior. Behavior that's really inappropriate for a 7-year-old girl. She might want to sit on my lap. She might want to be always kind of cuddled up or nestled in my parts, and I'm going to be the one who's going to have to set limits for her, even though it's really sweet that she's attaching to me. She's very, emotionally attached to me. It's not about me. It's not about meeting my needs or making me feel good. The focus should always be on the young person, the child, and what they need. And usually what young people need is not for us to be physically in their space to care for them. So observing really healthy, good boundaries around touch, and asking for and receiving consent. And recognizing that kids may not really know how to give or withhold consent. We have to hold back a little more. And again, this training doesn't really address it, but I want to speak just for a second about keeping the focus on children. They may ask us questions. They may ask us questions about our personal life. They might ask us questions about human sexuality. It's not our job to answer those unless it's in the context of something like an Our Whole Lives training with trained facilitators and young people whose parents have given consent to talk about sexual matters. If they ask us about our personal lives, especially our personal intimate relationships, we turn the subject back to them. I wonder what you're really curious about. We're not there to be their confidants. We're not there to kind of offload our stuff into them. Any questions or concerns about that? Okay, we'll keep going down the bullet list. So what's the second bullet? Nice and loud.
Any display or demonstration of sexual activity, abuse, insinuation of abuse, or evidence of abusive conduct towards a minor.
Someone want to give a real life example, one they've heard on TV or read about or witnessed? So Carol heard about an 18-year-old in relationship with a 14-year-old. Kids, young people love to talk and gossip. You're going to find out if there's something going on that's not appropriate. Number 3?
Actually, can I just
Yeah.
clarify and parsing that sentence sort of, this includes any display of sexual activity, kind of regardless of age of the partners?
So, what are you saying? Help us understand this more.
It's like two 14-year-olds or somebody saying like, hey, I just hooked up with somebody. That would be a display of sexual activity. Would that fall under this?
I don't know, because it doesn't say, so this policy is not that granular. If I were, a youth ministry mentor on a confirmation retreat, I would say during youth group time, we're not being intimate, physically, sexually intimate with each other. You can't forbid a dating relationship between two consenting minors in youth group, but you can say when we're here, we're all together, we're not like sneaking off to make out or that sort of thing. That's behavior that is covenant breaking and sort of breaks the unity of the group. But if there is this could be sexual harassment between youth group members. It could be young kids repeating things to other young kids that they've heard who need to be taught that language is not appropriate for Sunday school or for church, but kind of go into it with them. Why not? If they're sort of innocently repeating it, don't just shame them, help them understand why it's inappropriate. And you can always involve me or Reverend Kit in a conversation like this. Anything more about that? Does that cover it? Okay. Number 3.
Sexual advances or sexual activity of any kind between any person and a minor.
Okay. So this seems related to number 1, but what might be sexual advances?
This would be like the thing that the Catholic Church had with priests abusing boys. That would be this.
Say that again?
The thing that the Catholic Church had with priests abusing boys. Not just,
Yeah.
it obviously hasn't been yet, but
Yeah. Any kind of flirting, comments about appearances, inappropriate touching. And this, again, is not covered in the policy, but I would also look at grooming behaviors, like adults who cultivate a special relationship, particularly with a vulnerable child, a child who has difficulties at home, a child who is socially awkward or doesn't fit in. We know each other, we love each other, we do this training to protect ourselves and each other, but if you see something and you're not really sure what you're seeing, please come to me or Reverend Kit and describe it to us, and we can help you decide if it's worth acting on. Okay, physically abusive behavior or bodily injury to a minor. This does happen all the time, not necessarily intentionally, but the kids are playing and they bump into each other and they get cracked skulls. If something happens to the degree that, one or more children are crying and they have a visible injury, it's probably worth talking to Trust or Carolyn or me or Rev Kit, filing a report, kind of getting to the bottom of it to see if there was some intention behind it or whether it was totally an accident. The parents are upset. We want to be able to explain to the parents in a calm, rational manner what happened. The next one. Someone read it nice and loud.
Physical neglect of a minor, including failure to provide adequate supervision in relation to the activities of FCCB.
Okay. Who has an example of this?
I was leading a
play video games all weekends. Had to
12 years old. Yep. So you had to report that. Yeah, as a teacher. Yep.
In relation to FCCB,
Yep.
right,
So,
like activities, like an example of that would be like no adults in the back playground while the kids are running around during afternoon.
right.
Like that would be an example of us neglecting supervision.
Right.
I'm not saying that.
It's never going to happen here. But it's one reason why, we'll get to this in a minute, we have such a strict check-in, check-out policy to the play yard, and we don't just have young ones running around at coffee hour, because we need to make sure they're safe. What if they cross the street? What if they go off with another adult, a not safe adult, not from our church, because they're so innocent and naive. I'll read the next one. Mental or emotional injury to a minor caused or exacerbated by worker means volunteer. So, I want to give an example of that.
Well, it could be something really simple, like a kid who grows up in a verbally abusive household, and maybe the youth mentor gets frustrated and yells.
Yeah.
It's actually emotionally abusive to a kid like that.
Yeah. We are in positions of great trust, and it doesn't mean we're not human. We don't get frustrated. The youth ministry mentors sometimes go away with the kids for the night or the weekends. Sometimes you don't get a lot of sleep. Work camp, the situations can be, it can be very stressful. It's hot, you're tired. But we have to be the most mature humans in the room at all time, and practice good self-care and take breaks. And remember that our kids are going through a lot, and we don't necessarily know what they're going through. I've observed youth ministry mentors thinking they were being playfully sarcastic, but really being curt with kids who are kind of like annoying. I mean, we have kids at church who are not accepted in their schools, and one reason why church is so important to them is this is a place where they can come and be unconditionally experience the unconditional love of Jesus Christ as mediated through loving, mature humans. So we have to be at our best selves all the time, and use our best language. The letter to James said, the tongue is a fire. How many fires do we set with our tongues, with our unkind words to each other? And so it's our job to really build up the kids whenever possible. And be careful even of humor. Humor is important, but a lot of humor is at someone's expense. And so how do we use humor to be inclusive and build up rather than break down? Okay.
Just to comment, that language and such, the tongue of fire, is something not just between maybe us as the school, as the teacher or the adult and the kid, but also between kids.
Yeah.
So we have to know how to, sort of put out the fire between the kids.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we best do that by modeling, and when it does happen, like trying not to shame the kid who was hurtful, because often kids who are hurt, Bishop Flunder, one of my heroes, says, hurt people hurt people. They're carrying that in from someplace else. And especially in, pre-adolescence, adolescence, kids are experimenting with power. So how can we, teach them to grasp good kinds of power instead of hurtful kinds of power? Okay, presence or possession of obscene or pornographic materials at any FCCB event. That one seems pretty obvious. One thing I learned through experience, well, that sounds terrible, I shouldn't put it that way. One thing I didn't understand until I had a middle schooler is that when middle schoolers, say a middle schooler sexts another middle schooler, both middle schoolers are in possession of child pornography, which is a federal offense. So, they're learning this at school, hopefully, but we can reinforce it here. Naked pictures of people, not appropriate to show people, to send to people, never, 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 any kind of pornography. You show it to another kid, hee, this is funny. No, it's a federal offense, and it could get them court involved. So, ixnay. The presence, possession, or being under the influence of any illegal or illicit drugs. That's pretty straightforward. The consumption of or being under the influence of illegal or illicit drugs or alcohol while leading or participating in a function for minors at FCCB. So is it okay to have your glass of wine with dinner before you come to the Halloween lock-in? No. You can skip it for that night. Be here, be sober, be present for them. Any questions, comments, situations you want to lift up here? No, Paula, not even a little bit of wine. Yeah. You have wine at Camp Castle, the kids are asleep. But you're not there in the capacity of a youth ministry mentor. No. When you're there as a youth ministry mentor, you are there sober. Because someone could fall out of bed and get hit, and you might need to drive them to the ER. You need to be present and sober if you are in that position of responsibility for the kids.
The last point, I wonder if that should be expanded to, if we're participating in functions for minors, I would like to see cigarettes and marijuana included, even though they're not illegal. So I think that should be expanded. I think it's a time for those elements to be done somewhere, not in activities with kids.
I think we talked about this a little bit in the revision, and that's why we kept illicit along with illegal, because at least marijuana was considered illicit in what we looked at. But I hadn't thought of cigarettes, and I completely agree with you.
Okay, next section, before I turn it over to whatever's next. Supervision rules, which is section 7, also on page 4. The church will adopt the 2-adult rule, which means no adult shall be left alone with a child or children, and requires a reasonable ratio of adult workers to be maintained in each situation involving the supervision of children. So, little children need more adults. Bigger kids, fewer adults, but always at least 2 adults. This can get tricky in situations like driving youth places, We try never to be alone with a youth. Yes?
I got asked to help little kids use the bathroom once in a while.
This doesn't have a toileting procedure. Carolyn, what do we do about toileting? I think because the parents are here, you bring them to their parent. And little kids will often give you visual cues like that they gotta go. So if you see that happening, say, hey, do you have to go potty? Let's go find your parent.
Yeah, just like in the nursery, when one child is going to the bathroom and an adult, then also the child is in that room or with just an adult.
Yeah, we'll need to figure this out, because logistically, I don't know that it's possible to get those small people to their parents in time, right? For them not to have the accident. Because I'm thinking all the time we toilet our toddlers right here on our own in Loper when the grown-ups are in the sanctuary. A 2-year-old's body doesn't give them enough warning.
I think we need to think about this a little more because it really is important. Because, not to malign anyone in the room, but a lot of sexual abuse happens in the context of toileting. So I think one thing at the very least we might need to do is keep doors open. When you're bringing a child to the toilet, you keep this door open, you keep prop the bathroom door open, I don't know if it can be, and you keep the stall door open. So you're never really alone with a child in a space where they are partially or mostly or altogether nude.
Yeah, and Jesse, we can do that too for aftercare. We can take them to the bathroom where we can interramp and we can just leave the door open.
I work in some schools where it was the policy for the adult to just stand in the doorway. Just like
Yeah.
the kid.
Some kids aren't dexterous enough though. I mean, I'd rather err on the side of a few accidents than putting our kids at risk of sexual abuse. So I think we need to actually strengthen that part of this policy. That's a great question, though.
Possibility that, perhaps if you're quick enough and taking the child maybe down to one of these bathrooms down here, you can grab another person on the right.
You can
hand and
always
ask
do
for
that.
proper assistance.
Well, and honestly, I think, what did you say? It's not about gender. I was just going to say, like, we're kind of beyond gender now, but I think, yeah. And I understand this is super complex. It's like, on the one hand, a picture of a child on a phone is child pornography, and another, like, grab another adult. You know, let's make it, here's a 2 p.m. show. But it's all about, you know, avoiding secrecy and teaching good boundaries.
I have a question.
Yeah.
There have been a couple times when I've been asked to drive junior high kids, and there've not been enough adults for another adult to be with me. And I did, and no one seemed at all concerned about it.
Yeah.
Because we had limited numbers of drivers.
Right.
More than one youth in the car.
Yeah.
I remember we did on purpose.
If there's more than one
Have a
youth,
3-person.
yeah. So that what's tricky is if you're dropping kids off at their homes, if you have one kid left at the end.
Make those parents meet you at the person.
Yeah, we try to do a little do-si-do. It's like that SAT problem with ferrying people across the, yeah, exactly.
Saying like if we were in, two of us were up in the tower room, and one of us had to leave for a very important reason briefly, would it be okay for the other person to stay with the kids if there were more than one kid?
I think it's,
I've heard yes and no.
well, it's to be avoided if possible. But, you know, if you have an emergency,
Oh, yeah, that would only happen for an emergency.
Yeah.
I can think of a lot of potentials.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, it's nice to know there's that leeway just in case it's
Parental permission shall be obtained in advance for involvement in church-sponsored programs or activities. Don't take kids to things without their parents knowing. Church staff and volunteer directors will supervise on an ongoing basis. I think it's supervise volunteers on an ongoing basis, and make unannounced visits into classrooms or other program sites from time to time. Trust and Carolyn will drop in and see how you're doing and see how, you know, if the inmates are running the asylum. Just kidding. How you're handling things, and they're there to support you. Again, your volunteers. We're so grateful to you for being a really treasured part of our church children and youth spiritual formation and loving them. You know, I actually just read some really interesting data that said young adults, like a huge factor in young adults staying in church is whether or not they had an adult mentor who was not their parent while they were growing up in church. It makes them something like 5 times likelier to stay connected, to find a community of faith as an adult if they had a loving adult mentor in their childhood or youth. So Carol and Trust are there to support you and help you build your skills and check in on you. The church will require parents to complete their child care sign-in as a check-in, check-out procedure for children supervised during hours outside the regular Sunday morning Sunday school program. Children shall only be released to their parents or responsible adults specifically identified by their parents on the sign-in. So this would be like parents' night out or in the play yard after worship. That's primarily what we're thinking of? Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. In individual sessions with minors, parental permission shall be obtained prior to a minister meeting privately with a minor, or the 2-adult rule shall be used in that instance. Prior permission may be granted by parents to cover a particular time period for the child to receive counseling from a particular minister. So this is primarily related to me or Reverend Kit, but it also could be, you know, the youth pastor. There's a 14-year-old who's going through a lot and really wants to process things with the youth pastor, is fighting a lot with their parents. Trust, or whoever's in trust position, would need the parents' permission to meet privately with that child. And even then, it would be in an office with a glass window, with people walking by, not after hours, just to protect everyone. Finally, programs with children and youth should be centrally located with windows in the doors. And if you're in spaces where the doors do not have windows, you may leave the door open. Any questions about any of those items?
I just have a question about the parental permission one. So if our hypothetical 14-year-old is going through a lot at home, their parents may not be super enthusiastic about them going to an outside party. So is there any, have we thought of anything maybe?
That covers private counseling, but what I would probably do in that situation is say, hey, let's check in at coffee hour. Let's find a quiet corner where there's a ton of people around at coffee hour. Tell me what's going on at home. And then if what's going on at home was a reportable offense, then I would report it to the authorities so that they could follow up on a sexual or physical, emotional abuse charge.
Okay, it's like a distinct thing.
Yeah. But I would find just other totally sanctioned ways to connect with the youth.
And some of these rules, I can't do them. The last one we mentioned, I teach Sunday school in the tower room. Doesn't have a window in that door, the door gets closed.
Mm-hmm. Are you alone?
No, I'm not alone.
You're not alone, though.
Not alone.
Then you're okay.
Well, okay, I didn't read that as that.
That's if you're alone. What does it say? It doesn't say that.
It doesn't say that.
Are you taking notes?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll add that.
Okay.
Thank you.
And in the rebuild, the tower room may stay the youth space, and you're right, it's not ideal, but we have an opportunity in the Pilgrim Hall rebuild to make sure all these safety precautions are built, physical safety, emotional safety are built into all of our spaces for children and youth.
That tower room, by the way, is a great teaching room.
It's a cool space.
It's a really nice.
What, Emma?
With the sanctuary getting used sometimes. it's
Yeah.
harder for youth spaces.
Yeah, it is tricky. Any other questions about that section? Thank you all. Over to Russ.
Hey everybody, so we're gonna do something I like to do sometimes when the emotions are intense. And it's, just a second. So we're gonna do something that's a couple of breaths. I like to call them a cleansing breath and a soothing breath. The first one is very loud, and the second one might be calmer or not. So please join me in a big, loud, cleansing breath. Let's do another cleansing breath. Now a nice, calm, soothing breath. We have addressed a lot of difficult things, which we will continue to do. I want to remind you all that we're here in this space, that you're safe, that you're in good community. If you're not physically here right now, don't forget that you can reach out to pals and feel better about things, because this is a lot of heavy stuff and it could be bringing stuff up. All right, one more soothing breath. Sarah, will you come up here, pretty please?
As Sarah comes up, I also want to lift up that I recently I have to take a training every year for camp, even though I've been going to camp for 35 years. But this training I took was very short and really excellent, and we're going to get a log on for it so you all can take it online as well before the new September program year begins. It just took me about literally 20 minutes online. It was just a great refresher for recognizing signs and keeping good boundaries to keep our kids safe.
Okay, so Reverend Molly talked about something called mandated reporters. So when there is a suspicion of child abuse or neglect, there are certain professions that are required to report that, whether they don't have a choice about it. So ministers are under that category. There's a procedure they have to do that like a lay person is not required to do. So that's important to know, and that is why probably FCCB has a policy that if you suspect child abuse or neglect, that you need to speak to one of the ministers about that suspicion. So there is a handout in your folder from the Alameda County Child Abuse Prevention Council. I should introduce myself. I am Sarah Woods. I am a member here at FCCB. I am also a supervisor for Department of Children and Family Services in Alameda County, and I've worked for them for 19 years. There are actually several of us who work in child welfare in our church. I won't out anybody else, but I can own it. So abuse and neglect can look like different things. There are different categories of abuse and neglect. It can be physical, which is things like shaking, hitting, beating, burning, or biting a child. It can be emotional, which is excessive shaming, yelling, or belittling, putting down a child, saying, like a persistent pattern of that impacts the child in where they're emotionally harmed. It can be sexual, which can be incest. It can be forced sexual activity, exposure to sexual stimulation that's not appropriate for the child's age, and exposure to materials that are sexual in nature that are not appropriate for the child's age. And it can be neglect, which is a pattern of a failure to provide for the child's physical needs, food, clothing, shelter, medical care, pattern of failure to provide for the child's emotional needs, such as affection, attention, and supervision. So a child might disclose something happening to them or experiences they're having that might make you think that something like this, one of these categories, might be met. Our role is to just find out like what the child is saying, not to investigate the full, all of the details. That is somebody else's responsibility. And we don't want to be conducting a child abuse investigation if we are not trained to do that. So what you really just want to do is, if you see or suspect something or a child says something that has you concerned, you can ask some follow-up questions. You don't keep it really open-ended. Don't lead them in a certain direction. Just be curious and take it seriously. Then if it somehow triggers that it might be abuse or neglect, that is, I would imagine, when the ministers would want us to loop them in. And then they probably have a procedure in which they would look into that. So things to keep in mind about child abuse and neglect is it may not be a disclosure of like this and this and this is happening to me. There may be signs and symptoms just to be paying attention to, particularly around sexual or physical abuse, that you would want to maybe pay attention to. It's not that you would want to ask the child about this, but it might be something to talk to the ministers about if you notice these kinds of patterns. And when I say that, there's a handout that talks about age factors to consider. It's sort of the second page, halfway down. So some things to consider for young kids. We also want to take into account that risk for them is higher if something is happening at home. And so if they say or do something that seems like you are worried that something's happening for them at home, you want to take that into consideration, that young kids are vulnerable and they can't always explain everything that's happening. So if you do see marks or bruises or burns or bite marks that you don't know about, report that to the ministers and follow their direction around that. For school-aged and teen children, those children are more likely to self-report. They might tell a trusted adult what's going on. But in terms of physical or sexual abuse, you can also think of it may show up in their behaviors, even if they're not disclosing it. So there's a description on the third page that sort of talks about indicators or things to pay attention to, that if you feel like they might have something to do with trauma or experienced abuse, you can talk to the ministers about that. So for very young kids, if they're telling you that they are sexually active, if they are pregnant, if they are itchy in their privates, and it seems unusual for that age, you might want to, that's something to be thinking of. If they are displaying sexual behavior that doesn't seem age appropriate, we all know that children do have sexual identity and sexual development, but if it seems very explicit or raises a flag in their play that seems like they have sexual knowledge that doesn't really make sense for their age group, that is a sign. You shouldn't necessarily like quiz them about it, but it's something to talk to your minister about. But so look, disclosures can also just not be like verbal. They can also be through a child's like behavior. If they see like other types of behaviors like excessive touching themselves, excessive masturbation, things like doing it around other kids. Again, like most kids are being like taught boundaries around that at home. So if you see a kid who's really struggling in that way, that could be a sign or symptoms. And then just if they are showing other types of especially older youth showing self-destructive types of behaviors, what can be underlying is trauma or abuse or neglect. So if a teen or a youth is cutting or feeling suicidal or harming animals or setting fires, like all of these things, those are often, we think of them as just like antisocial behaviors, but they can be symptoms that there's abuse or neglect going on. So it's just behavior to be concerned about, not just to judge it as like defiant or breaking rules or bad behavior. Yeah, and then, if so there's sort of a long list. I'm happy to answer questions. I don't want to bore you with like all of this stuff. I think the thing for me, like that to take away as like people who work with children is just pay attention to what they're saying and doing. And if anything jumps out at you as concerning or unusual given their age and development, talk to a minister, talk to them about what you're seeing. If there's a gut read you have on a situation, use your ministers. They are more highly trained in this. The other thing to think about is then if there is an explicit disclosure, believe children. You can ask enough questions so that you have a sense of what they're trying to tell you, but you don't want to necessarily take it to the point where you're asking them, when did that happen? How many times did that happen? You don't want to get into all the details. If a child actually discloses to you, get enough information so that you understand what they're trying to tell you, believe them. Don't promise them that you're not going to tell anybody, that it's a secret between the two of you.
They may have been told by their abuser that something bad will happen to them if they tell someone, and so they may ask you to promise not to tell, and you say, it's my job to make sure you're safe, and I can promise you I'll do everything to keep you safe.
Right.
They'll probably tell you anyhow. They want to tell you or they wouldn't have brought it up.
Yeah, and that's also in the handout. Like reassure them of what you're going to do to help keep them safe and that you want them to be safe. And you can also ask them like what would help you feel more safe, as long as it's not like, I promise I'll keep your secrets, because that is, abuse lives in like a world of secrets. So that is just the one big don't. And then there is on this handout, there is the number for the child abuse hotline in Alameda County. It is helpful to know, also if you don't know who the abuser is, there's ways to report that too. You don't need to, again, if the child isn't disclosing it right away and you're just asking them general questions, it's not your job to find out who's doing this to them and to conduct the investigation. It's just really to believe them and, again, just make sure you understand what they're trying to tell you. So, any questions? Dorothy.
What would be the right time to tell you guys, like what's happening? Because you know how you guys are sometimes like we'll be like up on those stage, like so I say something and then like.
Probably right at, like, not when we're on stage, but as soon as possible after the incident. And if, like, there's something going on, say, two kids are fighting or something, don't wait for us to be available, just go get any safety.
And I did see in our sort of procedures that I was looking over about child abuse and neglect. Now I've lost my thought. Oh, yes, you should also not then tell lots of other people when a child has disclosed to you. That may go without saying, but I just feel like it should be said out loud explicitly. So find the ministers, or Carolyn probably is somebody you can talk to too. If you do suspect, yeah, right. But yeah, you should not be sharing this type of sensitive information with other people, or confronting people about their behavior. Because again, it has not been investigated. It's not your job to do that. So if there is some indication of who might be involved in the abuse or neglect, you shouldn't take it upon yourself to follow up. So. All right. You're welcome.
Of this training. I've got 2 of them, so they'll go down the 2 rows. So please write your name and sign if you were here and if you understand both policies.
We're going to do a very quick technique to kind of get back into the room. You may be feeling a little bit spacey. There are a lot of heavy things that we're all holding together. So do me a favor, pick an index finger, whichever one's your favorite. And if you don't have a favorite, just pick an index finger. Now point at something red. Now point at something orange. Now point at something yellow. Now point at something green. Now point at something, what comes next? Blue? There's a rainbow. It's cheating. Point at something blue. Point at something indigo. Which one's indigo? Emma's shirt might have something. There's something violet. Okay, and now just take a big deep breath. All right, so we are talking about reporting, which is something we've kind of been talking about. So to clarify, I want to specify now that there are 2 types of reporting that we talk about. And the first one that we've addressed a little bit more is suspected child abuse. So if you're looking at your packet, that's section 9, or Roman numeral IX. And it's a long section, but it comes down to 2 things for most of y'all. If you have cause to believe that somebody's been affected by abuse or neglect, ask open-ended questions. Again, you're not doing an investigation, you're just understanding what the kid's saying, and then report it to the minister or director. And a point that section kind of makes is don't confront. Please don't confront. You probably won't confront, but please don't confront. Okay, so that is the first type of reporting. And the second type of reporting that we're going to shift our attention towards now is reporting accidents and incidents. So what are accidents that happen? Like, just shout out some examples of something that could happen. It's an accident or incident.
Scraping your face on the concrete with a tiny ball.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Yes. What was that?
Tripping down the stairs.
Tripping down the stairs, yes.
Breaking the clock because you threw a ball at it.
Breaking the clock because you threw a ball at it.
Falling out of the tree in the play yard.
Falling out of the tree in the play yard. Yep. Anybody think of anything else? Let's just.
Someone in the eye with a skittle.
Somebody gets hit in the eye with a skittle. So these are those things where you think like, should I report it? Should I not? This report takes like 3 minutes, and in any of these situations, having a paper trail is way better than not having a record. So if any of these things happen, or any other ones, you've got this form that you do. And just like the other kind of reporting, you get this to either one of the ministers here or one of the directors. So that's Carolyn and me right now. So what we're going to do, yes, please.
Are there other copies of these?
There are.
In places that aren't this folder?
Yeah, so we put these, they're by the reception desk over in Duran House. So there's kind of a document tray attached to the side of the desk, and you can find those there. And ideally, you want these, when you're done with them, the ideal is to hand them directly by hand to either a minister or one of the directors, Carolyn or myself. And if that's not an option, you can put it in our mailboxes in Durant House. And because it's the future, like, you can text us to let us know too, if you can't hand that directly to us. So the reporting process, and this is kind of more thoroughly done in Section 8, which is Roman numeral V, III. Something happens, fill the report, plus any witness reports, which is kind of a supplemental that you find on the back. Tell the parents what's going on, and that's not to get anybody in trouble, it's to get the most support possible for everybody. And then submit your report to the minister or director. Okay. So, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna pick pairs of twos. Do y'all have a person? Do you have time for this? Just a short 5 minutes. Okay, everybody pick your pair. Okay. Do me a favor and somehow visually indicate to me when you find your person that maybe a high five with them if you're comfortable, and maybe like pointing directly at them. Cool. Thank you. I appreciate it. Now probably whoever's just quicker, I need you to, on each team, raise your hand to volunteer to be person A. Okay. Everybody has a person A? Okay. And the other person's person 1. Now, person A, the person who raised your hand, you're a volunteer who witnessed something. And it was one of these examples. Keep it gentle, please. Somebody tripped. Somebody got hit in the eye with a Skittle, maybe. I don't know. Possibly like Emma was playing ball and then tripped and bumped into me and I fell down the stairs. But I'm okay. But it was still an incident. It's worth recording so people are like, what did Emma do to trust? You'll have a record and be like, oh, it was just playing ball. Anyways, person A, you are making up that scenario. Feel free to copy mine. Feel free to make a new scenario. Person 1, which is the person who did not raise their hand earlier. Please retrieve one of your 3 youth and child accident/incident reports. And your task now is to fill out that report. You might have noticed that this is a hypothetical situation. So all of your information is going to be hypothetical. We're not doing this for accuracy. The point right now is to just go through the paper and to kind of get a sense of what information you're looking for when you want to let the ministers or director know what's going on. Clear? Go for it.
That'd be an allegation. You're saying if a kid came to aftercare like with an injury?
Yeah, from like the parent or something, like do something to them.
That would be, since we have like the two types of recording, where this is the incident report, and then the other kind is abuse reporting, and that would be a situation where you basically talk directly to a minister or to a director. And since it's not something that like happened here, it's not an incident report, but you definitely want to let one of the mandatory reporters know. Very good question, thank you.
And Dorothy, this is for you to fill out when you see something happening.
Great. Anybody catch the typo? There's a Voss. That is it. Yes, it's fixed in the newest version. But I'm glad you're paying attention. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Well, friends, that was our training. Thank you so much for coming tonight, and even more importantly, thank you so much for being volunteers with our children and youth. We are so lucky to have so many people loving them in this church. So thank you all so much for your commitment and for all the things that you do that go unseen by everybody else to care for them. And thank you so much again for coming tonight. If you have questions or comments about this and recommendations for other things you'd like us to change, please email Trust or Molly or me. We're totally open to it. This can be a working document. Janet.
The incident that I made up was like a child got stung by a bee. Is there anywhere the parents let us know if their child is allergic to things like that?
We, on the sign-in form for aftercare and for the nursery, there's an allergies section that they should tell us those kinds of things, but otherwise, no. Yeah, hopefully we can find the parent really fast.
A lot of kids will be wearing an allergy bracelet these days.
An allergy bracelet.
I think when kids have extreme allergies, like I know for children who have nuts, the parents will always let us know. Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you again. Have a safe trip home, and I'll see you all Sunday, I hope.